Hello, my name is Sydney and welcome to my 2024 Reading Wrapped. I am a huge fan of data and looking at data and creating new data and sharing data and comparing data, especially comparing year to year of my own data. So of course Reading Wrapped was always going to be a thing. So here is my reading of 2024, all in statistics and numbers. We're going to go through kind of fast, but if you like what you see, I have a ton of videos on my channel that include my reading spreadsheet, which is where I got all of this data from. All right, let's get started. My reading goal for 2024 was to read 150 books. The number of books I actually read in 2024, 150. I made sure of that. It was a struggle. Total number of pages that I read in 2024 was 41,330. The average number of pages per book was 275.53. That is because towards the end I was so desperate to hit that 150 reading goal that I ended up reading a lot of novellas. The number of pages per book, you can see from a graph here, a vast portion of them are 300, 400. Those are going to be my actual books, but there are just so many 100, 200 pages books in there that I need to get those novellas. There are a few higher end. I used to read a lot more of those higher end books, but it didn't really happen this year. Now the total number of books read, you can see December I went all out and I read 30 books so I could hit 150. Otherwise you can see that I have a lot of books that I read in the spring into summertime, as well as a few other lying months. February, as you can see, there was one book read, and that is why I had to do what I had to do in December. However, when we compare this chart to the total number of pages read, even though you could see how many more books there were in December, it's really not that many more pages. When we look at it like that, you can see that I had a pretty low kind of summer, except for June, and it got steadily more and more as the months went on into winter. But spring was still a lot of books. But books are not the only thing that I read and track. So we have to also take into account the number of fan fictions that I read. I read a lot of fanfic. In fact, I read 244 in the year of 2024. I read a lot from like hundreds of thousands of words long to just a couple thousand words. So this includes everything. The total number of fanfic's words read is just under 5 million words. Now, to put that into perspective, we have to do a little bit of math. So for about 5 million words, each page in a typical book is about 280 words. So we divide that equals about 17,600, 700 pages. Now, the typical book that I averaged was about 300 pages a book. Even though my average was 275, I still did 300. That equals to just under 60 books of fanfic read. So really, I didn't just read 150, I read over 200 book sized things in 2024. So when we look at the real number of pages, you can see that March and April were by far my best reading months. Once we take into account all the fanfics, you can see that February has now jumped up. Looks like I read only fanfic in February. August is also a much higher number now. And in comparison, December with those 30 books, it's not even in the top 3. So then we can look at them side by side. Ignore the white line, that was just to make sure that my graphs were equal size. You can see on the left when we have just books, things are pretty even along the way, with our winter looking a lot better. With fanfics included on the right, you can see that in spring I was a freaking maniac with reading. I read so many words consumed. And then August, really randomly, a lot of words as well. My average rating from here on out is just going to be about books. We're not including fanfics anymore. But my average rating for books is 3.25. Now, on a scale of perfect to D and F, having a 3.25 is not good. It is in fact below good. It is in between good and average, and that is atrocious. I don't want to have an average to good reading year. I want a good to great to perfect reading year. So this is something I'm going to be working on into 2025. Books by rating. You can see I gave a lot of books 4 stars, 3.5, 3 stars. Those are, as you can see here, somewhere between average and great rates for me. I've had very little 5 and 4.5 star reads. I want to get that number up next year. And I had an atrocious number of 1 to 2.5 star books. When we break it down by my most read genres, which are fantasy, romance, and young adult, you can see why that number is so low. My highest rating per genre is fantasy with an average rating of 3.74. It's still not great, but it's still much better. My young adult was next with 3.46. There are a lot of 4-star reads in there. No 5 stars though, and no 5 stars for fantasy either, even though I had 4.5 stars. For other, it was just, you know, all the rest of the books I read, 3.35. And then my lowest was actually also my most read, which is 2.90 average for romance. You can see that it is very much a bell curve, a lot in the middle, and then it kind of trickles out. But that is where I got all my 5 stars for the year. What this data tells me is that I need to go back to my roots, which is fantasy. Now, the number of books demoted from 5 stars down to 4.5, it's very interesting because Goodreads will tell you that I have multiple 5 stars when in fact I ended the year with 2. 3 books got demoted. Number of books I DNF'd this year, and when I say DNF, that means I reached at least the 30% mark in a book, which means I put time and effort, I tried. If I reached that point and I DNF it, I put it into my reading spreadsheet, and that was 7. So that does not include many books in which I gave the first chapter, and I was like, never mind. Now the number of books I should have DNF'd, 27. Moving on. Books by genre. You can see that romance was by far my heaviest genre this year. That is because I maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, got into contemporary romance and I was like, wow, I actually kind of like this. And I just got stuck there. I got stuck. I no longer had the capacity for those high fantasy long series that I used to read, and my brain couldn't take it anymore, and I just kept reading more easy romance. I'm actively trying to get away from that, go back to my roots of fantasy nowadays. I'm trying to retrain my brain to take in all those details and be in it for the long haul and not know that I'm going to get a happy ending in 300 pages, and it's been a struggle. So I still have read a lot of fantasy over the years, but just not nearly as many as I should have. I've also read a lot of YA. Now what's fun for me is that my genres have changed from 2024 to 2025. I've now broken down like contemporary romance versus historical romance. I've broken down contemporary YA and fantasy YA. So I'm really interested to see how this is going to change and what it's going to look like next year. Now, books by form. The most way that I consumed books this year was Libby Audio. I have the Libby app. It is free with your library, and I get a lot of audiobooks from there. I drive a lot. I'm on my computer editing photos a lot. I'm moving around a lot. That's when I consume all of my audio. I also read a lot of books off of Kindle Unlimited. I'm kind of shocked with how many there were. This is way more than I expected, but I'm happy with that. And then my third is own, as in the books behind me. Only 32 books owned though. You see how many books are behind me. You've seen my physical TBR videos. You know it needs to be higher than that this year. When you look at it by audio versus physical versus e-reader, you can see that it's actually really even. E-reader actually jumps to the top thanks to Kindle Unlimited and books that I get on loan from Kindle, but overall it's still pretty even of how I consume my literature. Now, I started the year with 602 books owned. I ended the year with 755. Number of books I acquired in this year, however, was 238, which means at the same time I unhauled 85 books, which is a net of plus 153 books for the year. I started the year with 479 books on my physical TBR. Now, throughout the year, I read a lot of books and kept them, but I also read a lot of books and gave them away. They were large parts of those unhauls. But that means the books that I currently have are 32 that I read off that, which means I ended the year with all those new books that I acquired with 575 books on my physical TBR. That is why I have my physical TBR challenge in an effort to get me to read these books. And now that I'm in my new apartment and I have access to all of them, I'm feeling very good about how many books behind me that I can read this year. That is a net of plus 96 books though in this year. So I'm hoping that that number will go down. Now, by percentages, I started the year with 20.4% of my books read, so a fifth. That's not good. That's not good. And yet I ended the year with 23.84% read. Closer to a quarter, but still not there yet, considering that all those books all those books that I read only attributed to less than 4%. 3.44 to be exact. Yeah. Where I acquired these books, a vast majority of them came from used bookstores, followed by thrift stores. Those I get for between $1 and $10, so they're kind of cheaper. And then the next two are from Barnes & Noble and Waterstones. Those are full price books, although I do have memberships at both of them, so I get 10% off, and I always take advantage of 25% off pre-orders, and like, you know, buy one get one kind of sale. So I'm not actually paying 100% of the sales from them, but close enough. You can see that I also get a lot of books from the library book sale, in which every book is $1. I get them all from a lot from little free libraries, in which the books are free. I just leave one in exchange. A lot of books from indie bookstores, in which I am paying full price for those. And then a lot of books from Illumicrate, which are the most expensive books that I own. Now, when you look at my where acquired total, so this includes all the books, not just the ones that I got this year, you can see that my most is actually Little Free Library, which means that before this year, I mostly got my books completely for free. This year, I did spend a lot of money on books. I wish I had tracked exactly how much, but I don't have that data. You can see following up Little Free Libraries now is Barnes & Noble, Library Book Sale, used bookstores, those are following, quickly followed by Thrift Store and Waterstones. And just a different way to look at this data, you can see where I acquired this year at the top and where I acquired total at the bottom. You can see it was about even on full price / reduced price this year for where acquired, with a little bit of free books in there. Whereas in the past, I've actually have a lot more free books that I've acquired, but still more reduced price and then still more full priced. And that is absolutely thanks to my book acquiring tendencies this year. Now, looking into more data for supernaturals, thanks to all that contemporary romance, none is my highest supernatural, and my next two are multiple or other. And that is so utterly unhelpful when I'm looking at data. I'm hoping that I will have better looking data for next year. Otherwise, you can see that I had 15 aliens, 6 for fae, 4 for shifter, 4 for witches, and then a few others sprinkled throughout. Romance, though, is a wide variety, and shockingly enough, I'll have even more categories for next year. Now, when I look at a book, I do the most prevalent love story. So if they are a brother's best friend, but also rivals to lovers, I'll choose whatever I feel took up more of the book. Also, on a note, enemies to lovers, I've read a ton of them, but I don't consider them enemies to lovers, so they are under rivals to lovers or dislike to love or whatever I deemed them actually as, not what they were marketed to me as. So you can see my most is actually none. I'm shocked that I read 14 books without romance this year, followed by other. Of course, I will have more categories next year, so those are hopefully shifted, followed by friends to lovers. That shocked me when I saw this, because I'm not a huge friends to lovers person, I thought, but apparently I read a ton of that. Followed by fake dating. I read 10 fake dating books this year, that's wild. Rivals to lovers, and soulmates. A little bit further along, you see Royal and Commoner, you see Marriage and Convenience, you see love triangles. Unfortunately, I read a lot of love triangles this year. Childhood friends to lovers, and then a ton of other types of romance tropes. Next, you see spice levels. A good portion of them actually had no spice whatsoever, and then a lot had, you know, fade to black, a single spicy scene. A lot of them had 47, like, multiple scenes, but only 14 of these books had spice that I would reread happily. Thankfully, I read no books this year that were all smut, no plot. I've read that in the past, and I didn't have any of those this year. I just haven't really been in the mood. Now, the number of rereads that I had that do not help me with my TBR, 20. 5 books made me cry. If you're curious, it's all these 5. None of them made me sob. I had no sobbing books this year, but these all made me like tear up, and maybe like a single tear went down my face. Hopefully that can go up next year. I did not read nearly enough queer books or enough books by people that don't look like me, but I am very happy about this statistic right here. All right, moving on. Books by author. When I find an author that I like, I tend to read everything they've ever written. And it's a little crazy, I understand this, but oh well. So I read all 19 books that Ali Carter has ever published this year, followed by 16 books by Riri Dixon, followed by 10 books by Elsie Silver, and 9 books by Sarah J. Maas, 7 by Kimberly Loving, 6 by Lise Kova, and 3 by Alexis Dario. Everything else was I read 2 books by the author or 1. How many books were on my priority TBR? This is the list of books that I set out saying, hey, I want to read these this year. I wrote down 60. That is way too much, I know. 30 of them were actually listed, and then 30 of them were different series that I wanted to get to this year. How many of them did I actually get to? 1. Moving on. Notable moments of 2024. I made a bookstore map. It is an interactive map that I made. It is now linked in my description below. It is including all of the books that are the bookstores I've ever traveled to around Europe, around the United States. It includes them based off of if I've if I visited them or not, but also the types, like if it's a used bookstore, if it's indie bookstore, if it's a bookstore bar. I love that map and I add to it all the time. And moved into my new apartment in August. In 2024, I finally, for the first time in like 15 years, had a space where I had enough place to put all of my books together. So all the books are together again for the first time in like 15 years, and it makes me so happy. I also started a BookTube back in August. I did when I moved into this apartment. I told myself that is going to be the start of my BookTube. I had been preparing for it for months, and I'm so happy I'm finally here. I'm absolutely loving it here so far. It's been 4 or 5 months now, and I am here to stay. And lastly, I started selling my spreadsheet. This is something that is brand new to me. I never sold anything like this before. I've never had an Etsy listing, but I do have it. If you like my spreadsheet, if you've seen videos for it, I do sell it for $5 and the link down in the description. It is a really nice way to support me as a person, support my channel, and like kind of give back to all the thousands of hours that I put into that spreadsheet. But if you're not able to buy, that's a-okay. I do have an older version of the spreadsheet that is for free that is also linked in the description. And that is all for 2024. So let's hear to 2025. If you like my content, I do post on YouTube Mondays and Thursdays. I also do have a TikTok, an Instagram, and a Goodreads. I'm also on Storygraph, but I'm not sure if you can be friends on there. Let me know if you can or not. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.